So I've just finished reading Ragtime by E L Doctorow, and it was an interesting experience. It really was a reading in two different phases. The first phase, I found it kind of hard to read for any length of time. I felt almost overwhelmed by the novel. There are a lot of characters and they're all interconnected, and as the book jumps from one to the other, there's always a link, or usually a link, especially at the beginning. So you're with this character and then it will have some transition into the next, and then another transition into the next. And it was quite pacey. It felt almost like the book was spilling out. It also has very, very long paragraphs. It also doesn't have line breaks for dialogue. So some pages are just a wall of text, and I found my eye just sort of glazing over and sort of spilling through the book. It had this momentum, this pace of like a rock tumbling down a hill or something, and I found that kind of overwhelming. I could only read, a couple chapters at a time, and they're not long chapters, to the point where I eventually actually started making a little map, a character map, and drawing lines between all of the different connections and things just to keep track of it, and that did help. But about a third of the way through, I actually put it down and I didn't read it for a while, for weeks. I'm not sure how long. And then I went back to it, and this was the second phase, and I decided to start from the beginning, and I zoomed through what I had already read, because I already reread in general, but because I had established who most of the characters were, in fact, there's actually a main character who's not even introduced until about halfway through the book. And that's not a criticism. I think Doctorow was doing something with that. But it meant, because I'd already established the vast majority of the characters and some of their connections, I was able to just zoom through it in 3 days the second time I read it. I really did enjoy this. It's a time period that I really love. It's set in the early 1900s in New York City, and it actually reminded me, there's a television show that I really love, it's one of my favorites ever, called The Nick, and it's set in 1900 New York City, and it's about a historical look at medicine. And I love medicine, I love medicine history, and so it's one of my favorite TV shows. And I rewatched that television show before I read this, and I think that helped me have the visuals and the sounds and the smells and the not that you can smell a TV show, but it made this book, it helped this book come alive for me. I also there's something about this time period where the wealth inequality was so bad and so visual, that the aesthetics of the time are so apparent, the gilded, grandiose, crafted, rich lifestyle is so apparent, with beading and glamour and champagne and brownstones and all of that, and then the poverty is so visceral, it's dirty, it is. In our own time, wealth inequality is not as visually expressed. We have billionaires who wear hoodies, and we have people who can barely feed themselves who have smartphones, right? I don't think wealth inequality has ever been taken to such visual extremes. And there's something about the harsh conflict between those aesthetics that I find really appealing and interesting. It was also an interesting time for development, for immigration, for development in science, in scientific thinking. It was a time for immense scientific discovery, but still within this framework of old white men. And I also think there's a bit of inherent foreboding in reading about this time, because we know what's to come. There's 2 world wars ahead of them. There's the Great Depression. Going back to Ragtime, I think what interested me most about this book is how he interweaves fictional people and real life characters that are fictionalized in his account. It was actually really interesting to look up oh, is that a real person or is that not? There are some very famous faces. Harry Houdini makes a few appearances. I think what interested me most is that he does not seem precious about his characters. He makes them full-fleshed, full-feeling people, but they are not, he does not shield them, and he doesn't protect them from the realities of this world that they live in. I was really surprised by how quickly he would relay information sometimes. Obviously, there are other scenes that are expanded upon and fully described in detail to give us, an idea of who these people are and what they're doing. But other times, important developments in the story were just flat out told us. It wasn't really shown. It was just this happened and then this happened to move the story along. And so we actually go through many, many years in, under 250 pages. It actually only occurred to me when I was in the final stages of the book that pacing and that sense of momentum and rhythm through the whole book, especially at the beginning, he's probably trying to replicate Ragtime, like the music of Ragtime when he does that. Overall, as much as I had a slow start with this book, I really did enjoy it. But I enjoy this time period and this setting. I'm interested to pick up another Doctorow and see what of this book is his style and what was just a style for this book.